At dawn, the king knows he will die. Not in a year, not someday, but soon. France is quiet this morning, too quiet. No celebrations, no loyal crowds beneath the palace windows, only guards who avoid eye contact, and corridors filled with whispers. Henri III is still alive, but everyone around him is already acting as if he is gone. This is not the fall of a battlefield king. It is the suffocation of a ruler trapped inside his own kingdom. Once, the crown of France commanded fear. Now it inspires impatience. The nobles no longer ask what the king wants. They ask how long he will last. Priests preach obedience with one breath, rebellion with the next. Courtiers smile, then disappear into secret meetings after sunset. Henri III sits on the throne, but the throne no longer sits at the center of power. Every decision he makes angers someone. Every compromise weakens him further. He has no army that truly obeys him, no faction that would die for him, no belief strong enough to protect him. France at the end of the 16th century is not waiting for peace. It is waiting for removal. The king understands this. That is what makes this moment unbearable. He does not fear death itself. He fears dying without meaning. Outside the palace, hatred has learned to dress itself as faith. Inside, loyalty has become a performance. Henri III walks through rooms filled with paintings of his ancestors. Men who ruled with certainty. Men who believed the crown was permanent. He knows better. The Valois Dynasty is running out of breath, and when a dynasty begins to suffocate, violence does not knock, it enters quietly. This is not the story of an assassination. It is the story of a kingdom that made it inevitable. If you want to understand how royal blood became a solution, not a crime, stay with this story. And if you want more cinematic history where power collapses from the inside, subscribe to the channel and continue the journey. Henri III rules a kingdom that no longer recognizes him, not because he is weak of will, but because France itself has fractured beyond obedience. To the Catholic League, he is a traitor, a king who hesitated when heresy demanded fire, a ruler who spoke of tolerance when they demanded purity. In their sermons, his name is spoken with disappointment first, hatred second. They do not call for his guidance. They pray for his removal. To the Protestants, he is no savior either. Too late, too cautious, too bound to a crown already soaked in their blood. His promises arrive after the damage is done. His reforms feel temporary, reversible, conditional. They do not trust a king who waits until desperation forces his hand. Between these forces, Henri III stands alone. Every decree costs him support. Every retreat convinces his enemies that pressure works. If he enforces Catholic authority, cities rise against him. If he offers concessions, allies abandon him. Power no longer flows outward from the throne. It drains into competing loyalties, each claiming to act in the name of France. The king is no longer the axis of the realm. He has become the meeting point of resentment. The court reflects this collapse. Nobles pledge loyalty in public, then negotiate survival in private. Officials delay orders, waiting to see which side will win tomorrow. Silence becomes safer than obedience. Henri III understands the danger of force. He also understands the danger of hesitation. Yet he is trapped by both. A decisive strike would ignite civil war beyond control. Compromise only confirms his weakness. France is not being governed. It is being postponed. Cities govern themselves. Leagues impose their own laws. Armed bands claim moral authority where the crown once stood unquestioned. The idea of France survives. The reality dissolves. Henri III still wears the crown, but the crown no longer commands belief. This is the cruelest stage of decline, not collapse, but suspension. A kingdom held together by fear of what comes next, not faith in who leads it. The king senses that history is narrowing, options are disappearing, and when a ruler loses the power to choose, others will choose for him. France has not rejected monarchy, it has rejected this monarch. And in moments like this, destiny does not arrive with ceremony. It arrives disguised as inevitability. In the next chapter, that inevitability will take a human form. Religion no longer lives in the heart. It marches in the streets. What once guided conscience now grants permission. In late 16th century France, faith stops being a private bond with God. It becomes a public declaration of loyalty, and more dangerously, a justification for violence. Men do not kill despite their beliefs, they kill because of them. Preachers speak not of mercy, but of purification. Crowds gather not to pray, but to be assured that bloodshed will be forgiven before it is spilled. Those who act in the name of God are praised as defenders of truth, not questioned as murderers. Violence gains moral armor. A Catholic who strikes down a Protestant is no longer a criminal. He is a servant of divine order. A Protestant who arms himself believes he is resisting tyranny blessed by false priests. Each side sees the other not as neighbors, but as contamination. Once this shift occurs, restraint becomes betrayal. The court watches this transformation with fear and dependence. Royal authority is too weak to suppress fanaticism outright. At the same time, it relies on religious legitimacy to survive. The crown invokes God to maintain obedience, even as that same invocation fuels chaos. This contradiction paralyzes power. To condemn religious violence fully would be to condemn the very foundation that still props up the monarchy. To endorse it openly would invite total war. So the court hesitates, and hesitation is interpreted as approval. Local leaders begin to act without waiting for royal consent. Militias form around sermons rather than laws. Cities declare themselves defenders of the true faith, answerable only to heaven. Justice becomes selective. Atrocities committed by the right believers are excused. Crimes committed by the wrong ones are amplified. The line between righteousness and brutality disappears. Fear spreads faster than doctrine. Families divide along confessional lines. Long-standing friendships dissolve overnight. Silence becomes a survival strategy. The monarchy no longer decides what is lawful. It reacts to what has already happened. Religion now shapes not only belief, but geography. Neighborhoods harden into enclaves. Roads become borders. Church bells signal warning as often as worship. France is not drifting toward violence. It is normalizing it. And the most dangerous change is not the bloodshed itself. It is the applause that follows. When killing is celebrated as virtue, compromise becomes sin. When forgiveness is promised in advance, restraint has no reward. The crown tries to speak of unity. Its words echo without authority. Because faith has been turned into a weapon, and weapons do not listen. By the time the court realizes the scale of what it has unleashed, belief has already escaped control. The kingdom is no longer divided by policy or ambition. It is divided by absolute certainty. And certainty leaves no room for peace. Jacques Clément does not emerge as a madman. He appears as something far more unsettling, a logical outcome. He is young, disciplined, and convinced, not driven by personal hatred, but by moral certainty. In his mind, the king is no longer a ruler. He is an obstacle to divine order. Clement grows up in a France where sermons are sharper than swords, where obedience to God is preached as higher than obedience to law, where killing the wrong believer is framed not as sin, but as duty. By the time his name enters history, his choice no longer feels extreme to those around him. It feels inevitable. He does not need a secret network. He does not need a vast conspiracy. The world has already prepared him. Pamphlets circulate openly, declaring that tyrants who tolerate heresy deserve death. Preachers speak of sacred violence without consequence. Crowds cheer when enemies of the true faith are punished by the mob. In this environment, restraint looks like weakness. Doubt looks like betrayal. Jacques Clement listens. He absorbs. He believes. He convinces himself that a single act can save a nation, that one blade can succeed where armies have failed, that God will recognize intention, not legality. The most dangerous part is not his hatred, it is his calm. Clement does not imagine himself as a criminal. He imagines himself as an instrument, chosen, purified, already forgiven. Death does not frighten him, it reassures him. Martyrdom has been glorified for so long that it now functions as currency, a promise of eternal reward exchanged for a moment of earthly violence. The court underestimates this kind of threat. Guards watch for rebels and armies. They do not fear a man carrying prayer in one hand and conviction in the other. The king remains surrounded by protocol, not protection. Access is still possible. Trust still exists, where it no longer should. Clement understands this. He prepares not with weapons, but with certainty. He rehearses his justification, not his escape. There will be no flight. This is not an assassination meant to succeed politically. It is meant to resonate symbolically. In his mind, killing the king is not rebellion. It is purification. The tragedy is not that one man believes this. It is that his belief is echoed by thousands who will never raise a hand themselves. The assassin is born not in secrecy, but in daylight, shaped by words spoken publicly, blessed by silence from those who should have condemned them. When faith becomes permission, violence no longer needs orders. It only needs belief. And France has taught him exactly how to believe. Henri III collapses without ceremony. No coronation bells, no final proclamation, no clear succession standing beside his bed. The blade does not just end a life, it severs a dynasty. For more than 2 centuries, the House of Valois shaped France through war, reform, survival, and ambition. It endured captivity, civil war, foreign invasion, and religious fracture. Yet its final moment is not marked by conquest from abroad. It ends alone, wounded by forces it helped unleash. There is no heir ready to step forward under the Valois name, no son waiting in mourning black, no brother capable of commanding loyalty. What remains is silence, followed by panic. The court does not know how to react, because the court no longer knows whom it serves. Officials hesitate, nobles calculate, cities wait to see which banner will rise next. Power does not disappear, it drifts. For years, the monarchy had been weakened not by defeat, but by compromise piled upon compromise. Each attempt to balance faith and authority had pleased no one. Each concession had stripped the crown of another layer of legitimacy. By the time the king falls, the structure is already hollow. The Valois Dynasty does not collapse in a single night. It has been bleeding internally for decades. The assassination simply reveals the truth. A crown cannot survive when obedience becomes optional. A throne cannot stand when belief outweighs law. France does not erupt immediately into celebration or grief. It pauses, uncertain, suspended between exhaustion and fear. The people do not mourn a fallen father. They question whether the monarchy itself still has meaning. 200 years of rule end not with a decisive battle, but with a sense of unfinished business. Too many grudges unresolved, too many promises broken, too much blood already spilled in the name of righteousness. The Valois leave behind no single legacy. They leave a contradiction. They helped build a centralized state, yet could not control its fractures. They strengthened royal authority, yet lost moral command. They survived external enemies, yet were undone by internal division. The blade that ends Henri III does not create the crisis. It merely confirms it. France now stands at a crossroads. One dynasty has vanished. Another waits in the wings. What follows will not be restoration. It will be transformation. The fall of the Valois is not the end of monarchy in France. It is the end of an era where blood alone could justify rule. From this moment forward, kingship will demand something more. More unity, more control, more distance from faith-driven chaos. The House of Valois ruled through brilliance and disaster, courage and hesitation. Its story closes not in glory, but in consequence. 200 years of power, sealed by a single blade. Henri de Bourbon does not step forward as a conqueror. He emerges as a necessity. France does not greet him with cheers or loyalty. It looks at him with suspicion, fear, and exhaustion. The kingdom is still shaking from the fall of the Valois, unsure whether monarchy itself can survive another failure. Henri inherits more than a crown. He inherits a country drained by decades of religious war, cities divided by faith, nobles armed with private armies, a throne stained not by foreign conquest, but by internal collapse. His claim is legal, but legality means little in a land where belief has become stronger than law. To many Catholics, he is unacceptable. A Protestant king, even a cautious one, feels like an insult carved into the memory of bloodshed. To others, he is simply the last option left standing. Henri understands this truth from the beginning. Power cannot be seized here. It must be endured. Unlike the Valois kings before him, he does not speak as if authority is sacred by birth. He behaves like a man entering a burning house, aware that every step could bring the roof down. The monarchy he inherits is no longer divine. It is conditional. Every order must be justified. Every alliance must be negotiated. Every march of troops risks reopening wounds that never healed. Henri de Bourbon does not promise salvation. He promises survival. His restraint is mistaken for weakness by some, but it is calculation. He has watched what happens when kings rule through pride alone. He has seen how certainty can destroy a crown faster than doubt. The Bourbon dynasty is not born in triumph. It is born in compromise. The throne he takes is surrounded by enemies, many of whom sit at the same table. Trust is a currency in short supply. Faith remains a fault line running through every village and every council chamber. Henri does not claim to embody the will of God. He claims to be the only figure capable of keeping France intact. That is enough for now. The people do not love him. They tolerate him. After years of chaos, tolerance feels like peace. The rise of the Bourbons marks a shift in French history. No longer can a king rely solely on lineage and ceremony. Authority must be rebuilt slowly, deliberately, and often painfully. Henri de Bourbon understands that his reign will be judged not by how loudly he rules, but by whether the kingdom still exists when he is done. The Valois ended with a blade and a void. The Bourbons begin with hesitation and burden. This is not a glorious inheritance. It is a fragile one. A crown passed not as a reward, but as a responsibility no one else was willing to carry. And in that reluctance lies the future of France. The Valois Dynasty failed. There is no way to soften that truth. It collapsed under the weight of division, fear, and bloodshed. Its final kings ruled over a kingdom that no longer believed in them. The crown lost its moral authority long before it lost its bearer. And yet, France did not fall with it. That is the paradox left behind by the Valois. From the ruins of religious hatred and endless civil war, something stronger began to take shape. Not a peaceful nation, not a righteous one, but a more durable state. The Valois era exposed every weakness of medieval monarchy. Faith was weaponized. Nobility fractured into rival camps. The idea of divine kingship shattered in public view. What remained was harsh clarity. Power could no longer rely on ritual alone. Loyalty could no longer be assumed. A king could no longer survive by lineage if he failed to control reality. The suffering of this period was not meaningless, but it was merciless. Entire cities were scarred. Families were erased. Generations learned to live with distrust as a daily instinct. Out of this trauma emerged a new understanding of rule. The state mattered more than the dynasty. Order mattered more than ideology. Survival mattered more than purity. France learned these lessons the hardest way possible. The Valois did not build the strong modern kingdom that followed, but they made it unavoidable. Their collapse cleared the ground. Their mistakes defined the limits of power. Their blood-stained legacy forced future kings to rule differently or perish. History rarely grants gentle transitions. It moves forward through failure as often as through triumph. The Bourbon dynasty would inherit not only a crown, but a warning. Rule without control leads to chaos. Rule without trust leads to rebellion. Rule without restraint leads to extinction. The Valois are remembered not as villains, nor as heroes. They are remembered as a necessary tragedy. Their fall marked the end of an age where kings believed faith alone could bind a nation. What followed was colder, more calculated, and more enduring. France paid a terrible price to reach that understanding. So the final judgment is not simple. The Valois failed as rulers, but through their failure, France learned how not to die. And that raises the question that lingers long after the last crown fell. Could the France that later dominated Europe have existed without passing through the death of the Valois, without enduring the chaos that stripped illusion from power itself? History offers no clear answer, only consequences. If you want to continue exploring how dynasties rise, fall, and reshape the world, follow this series and subscribe to the channel.